Thank you so much for your faithfulness, your hospitality, your generosity, your forward vision, and it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. In my remarks tonight, I want to cover several areas, and for those who may be attending for the first time or who have not yet made a commitment to put your hand to the plow with the Christian Heritage Party, I want to point out why we're doing what we're doing, why the CHP is necessary, why we need your help, and how you can help. For our longtime members, those who have been laboring faithfully in the trenches, I want to report on what we've been doing at the National Board, what we are doing, and what we will be doing. For all of us, I want to paint a picture or remind us with a biblical example why we can still have hope in spite of the troubled times in which we live. Why we need to take steps forward even when the prospects seem discouraging, and to challenge each one of us to act on our faith, not on the latest poll numbers, because without faith, as we know, it's impossible to please God. And He is the author and finisher of our faith. Without Him, we can do nothing, but with God, all things are possible. For those who are just learning about the CHP and want to know where we stand on issues of national importance, I'm just going to cover a few of the highlights of our policy. We have a tremendous policy book, and you can ask for it. You can find our better solutions on our website, chp.ca, as well as little videos about those policies, but I'll just hit the highlights. The CHP is the only federal party committed to the defense of innocent human life from conception until natural death. The CHP is the only federal party committed to the restoration and defense of natural marriage between one man and one woman. What a novel concept. The CHP is the only federal party committed to support the Charter Preamble, which says Canada is founded on principles which recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. The CHP is committed to mandatory balanced budgets and to paying off the national debt like a mortgage. We're also committed to freedom of speech and freedom of religion. We insist on the primary role of parents in the raising, training, and education of our children. Children do not belong to the state. Of course, we have many more policies on every facet of Canadian life, and detailed descriptions are available on our website, chp.ca. Most of those are well known and well understood by our members, so I'm not going to dwell on those things anymore here in this address. We live in a so-called information age, yet knowledge without wisdom can lead to wrong conclusions and solutions doomed to fail. Just look at the 2015 election results. And I hope everyone here can still remember 2015. At the pace of life today, it seems kind of a long ways back. A lot of water under the bridge. And our new Prime Minister has used his first 100 days since the election to do a lot of damage. And I don't believe that he's trying to destroy the country. I just think he's using the wrong roadmap, the wrong principles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So without the fear of the Lord, there is no wisdom. Since October 2015, many decisions affecting us all have been made by the man who is now our Prime Minister. I'm just going to mention a few of them, not to depress you, but to highlight the precarious state of Canada in 2016, why we need a party and candidates of high moral principle to withstand the collapse of our society. In his first 100 days, the PM has accelerated the influx of improperly vetted Muslim immigrants. He intends to house many of them, you've probably heard, on Canadian military bases. He plans to use taxpayer funds to purchase Qurans, Muslim prayer mats, and to build worship centers or mini-mosques, even on the bases. Rejecting Canada's Christian heritage, he's allowed the confusion of multiculturalism to blind his judgment. In his first 100 days, our PM has pulled Canadian jets out of the battle with ISIS, sending a mixed message to our friends and allies especially the victims of terror for whom we claim to have compassion. He has appointed a man named Omar Al-Ghabra, a radical Islamist, as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. This man, Omar, apparently helped Prime Minister Trudeau in his election campaign by getting him an audience in the mosques across the country. He supports Sharia law in Canada, and he does not consider Hamas or Hezbollah to be terrorist groups. Our PM seems oblivious to the obvious. Mr. Trudeau's government dropped the bail appeal in the case of Omar Khadr, a traitor who killed at least a soldier and who since has been made a kind of a hero by Canada's left-leaning, taxpayer-funded CBC. The PM appointed a radical feminist and a special rights for natives activist by the name of Jody Wilson-Raybould as our new Justice Minister. Unsurprisingly, the government has announced it will no longer enforce the bill, the law passed by the previous government, which is the First Nations Financial Transparency Act, in spite of the fact that 92% of First Nations were already complying with it, and it was going to bring transparency to the reserve system so that band members could know what the chiefs and councils were spending their money on. We're back to secret deals and special status. The new government intends to reverse legislation which allowed union members to see what their union bosses are paid and how their dues are being used. So much for transparency. And Mr. Trudeau has promised even more access for abortion. He indicated that he was willing to whip his MPs to support extreme legislation in regard to assisted suicide and euthanasia. We've since heard that he's backed off on that, but that debacle is running down the tracks towards us, and we will soon see a bill that probably none of us are going to be happy with. The PM supports, of course, Kathleen Wynne's provincial Liberals with their extreme sex ed programs, and he is keeping one promise, big time. He promised to run deficits for the next 4 years, and probably on into the future. And in fact, in this case, he's exceeding expectations. Our deficit will probably be more like 30 to 40 billion instead of the 10 billion he promised. And many other things, we don't have time to discuss them all, but there is one bright spot in the Liberal agenda which is being rolled out before our eyes, and it's the potential of electoral reform, something he promised during the campaign. And it looks like it will be either preferential balloting or ranked ballots, which seems to be his preference, or proportional representation, or a combination of the two. I'm going to speak about electoral reform a little more before I'm done. So in 2015, the Harper Conservatives were swept from power by a young man that they claimed was just not ready. The voters of this country turned out in droves to vote for a man who promised to legalize marijuana, run deficits for at least 4 years, make abortion more accessible, legalize assisted suicide and euthanasia, and to not deport immigrant citizens convicted of terrorism. In the tragic red tide of 2015, 23 pro-life Conservative MPs were defeated at the polls. I can tell you happily that not one of them was defeated because of us. Our strategy last year was to try to ensure that as many pro-lifers were returned to office as possible. We did withhold candidates in a number of areas, and where they lost, they just lost because of the public sweep into the Liberal camp. Basically, dissatisfaction with the Harper government. I wrote a letter to the 23 Conservative MPs defeated at the polls, thanking them for their service to Canada and inviting them to contact me if I could be of service to them. A couple of them have. And one former MP, Stephen Woodworth, he and I have been discussing, and he's planning to do a speaking tour in northern British Columbia. I will be his host for a few days in May. And he wants to warn Canadians, not just Christians, not just pro-lifers, he wants to warn all Canadians of the imminent threat to our freedoms. And so I met with him for a couple of hours the other day. He's not sitting there licking his wounds after losing his seat. He plans to do something because he believes, as we believe, that Canada is in a dire situation. We need all hands on deck. So while we all regretted the Liberal majority win, I look at it this way. Mr. Harper and his Conservatives had 4 years of majority government. They had 4 years in which they could have legislated against abortion. They could have reversed the law on same-sex marriage. They could have run balanced budgets. And they could have used the notwithstanding clause to rein in the Supreme Court. They did none of these things. They squandered their opportunity. They were weighed in the balance and found wanting. And a lot of people say, well, there's social issues and there's fiscal issues, and at least they were fiscally conservative. Think again. The Conservatives in their time in power increased the size and cost of the federal government by 42%. They added over $150 billion to our national debt. We're $150 billion deeper in debt than we were when they first took office. So at today's interest rates, which are very low, if we were to have a surplus budget every year of $2 billion, it would take over $70 billion just to get back to where we were when the Conservatives came to power. And that doesn't do anything about we now have a national debt of $615 billion. We're fortunate that interest rates are so low, but they will not stay low forever. Canadians are now paying $71 million every single day in interest on the national debt. And now we have the Liberals, who of course are even worse. So as we scan the political landscape, we could become discouraged. The Supreme Court is out of control. Parliament is in the hands of the ungodly. Our public school systems are leading many young people away from a biblical understanding. Personal freedoms are under attack. But we can't just sit in the dust and cry about it. What are we going to do about it? Eh, Jim? My friend Jim Enos is preparing a presentation. What are we doing? Not what are we talking about, what are we doing? So I want to look tonight at our choices in the light of the biblical story of the children of Israel after they left Egypt, but before they crossed over the Jordan River into the Promised Land. So here we are, the Christian Heritage Party, almost 30 years since we left Egypt. In 1986, a brave and visionary group of men and women, Ed Van Woudenberg, of course, leading the charge, saw the downward slide of our country, and they saw political parties on the right and the left blinded by the lust for power. They saw ever-deepening compromise on moral issues, and they saw the social and political consequences of unprincipled pragmatism. Our founders laid down the foundational understanding by which the Christian Heritage Party would seek to bring moral, biblical values back to Parliament and back to this country we love. So leaving Egypt was a bold move. Our CHP founders believed they could no longer rely on the big parties to protect our Christian heritage. They left the security of a committed bloc of voters, much as Moses and the children of Israel left the security of their enslavement in Egypt. Many of us, back in those early days, heard the call, and we joined CHP's founders, and we journeyed with them into the political wilderness. As a small party, we could not depend on state support. We could not depend on media coverage. We could not count on die-hard partisan loyalty. As the children of Israel depended on God for their daily manna and to protect them from armies larger and more powerful than they, we too in the CHP, in our journey through the wilderness, have had to depend on God for our supernatural provision. And God has not failed us. We in the CHP, many of you know, we have faced drought and hardship and challenges. We have faced scoffers, skeptics, and so-called scholars. We have faced our own fears and doubts. And like the children of Israel, we have seen unbelief take its toll. We have sometimes seen division sap our energy. We have been deregistered, discounted, disdained, but not destroyed. We've not yet reached the 40-year mark, like the children of Israel, but after close to 30 years, we still have not yet entered the promised land. We have not yet found our resting place in Parliament, with each man under his own vine and under his own fig tree. Shortly after the first election, and after every election since then, we have had some members return to Egypt, return to the big parties, the political machines, and the security of public acceptance. Early in our journey, like the children of Israel, we sent out our spies to spy out the land, and they came back with a good report. They said, the Canada we are seeking is just across the Jordan. In that Canada, the unborn and the elderly are treated with respect. In that Canada, the marriage covenant is honored. The family is respected. In that Canada, the Word of God is revered, and His laws are upheld. In that Canada, the grapes are huge, the crops are abundant, children enjoy their childhood without having their innocence stolen from them in public schools. In that Canada, private property is secure and wealth is shared willingly, not confiscated by corrupt politicians to achieve their own worldly aims. So what I'm describing is kind of more like heaven. We're going to get there one day when we cross that final Jordan as individuals. So don't misunderstand me, I don't claim we can create heaven on earth. Our hope should not rest in our own feeble efforts or ability. But it is our goal and our prayer that the principles of God's kingdom be brought to bear in our earthly existence, in our communities, in our country. Taught us to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are to live in such a way that the world can at least glimpse the kingdom of God through our actions. Our God commands us to demonstrate His ideals in the way we run our businesses, the way we raise our families, and the way we exercise justice in our communities. In spite of our best efforts and our earnest desires, we have not yet laid hold upon our inheritance. We've not yet crossed the Jordan. So why is it with God on our side that we have not yet achieved those goals? Why are we still wandering as a party in the political wilderness? And I believe that we do stand still. We've come to a pause. We have not yet crossed into that area of success because of the giants. Our spies did bring us a good report about the land, but they brought us a bad report about our chances of ever getting there, because they told us about the giants, and we can see them for ourselves. So what are these giants that we face? I'm going to name some of them, but there are others, and they work together. They gang up on us. They sneak up on us, and they don't fight fair. So one giant is massive political machinery of the big parties. The big parties have built-in and seasoned volunteer bases, incredible technology, databases, and taxpayer-funded war rooms. CHP, we're a volunteer army in every sense. They see us as grasshoppers, but we have to be sure that we don't see ourselves as grasshoppers. We must see ourselves as children of the living God, ambassadors in the political realm. Another giant is big money that works against us. Overwhelming advertising campaigns and budgets. Campaigns paid for by taxpayers. Costly promises and giveaways. Big war chests refilled by taxpayers while we have to raise our own money from our members. And thank God for our good, generous, devoted, faith-filled members who help us keep on going. We face the giant of mass media. Both the news and entertainment media are ranked against us. CBC, with over $1 billion of taxpayer funding each year. is pushing ideas constantly that are directly contrary to ours. They never mention us, but they give endless exposure to our opponents. Another giant is a daunting peer pressure, and his brother is uninformed public opinion. Many of those who would like to join us, like to vote for us, are conflicted. They have people, when they mention us or they begin talking about us, their friends tell them, oh, that would be a waste of time. To join our party means for them breaking ranks with their buddies and abandoning years of past efforts. Another big one that we face is we can see this one from a long ways off, and especially those who have been in the battle already. Sustained sacrifice, which is necessary to succeed. If we're honest with ourselves, we recognize that what we're entering into is not a one-day battle. It's not a one-year battle. It's not a one-election battle. To succeed requires the giving of time, energy, and money. But we have to weigh the cost of obedience against the cost of disobedience. What is the cost of not giving time, energy, and money? Well, the cost of not giving is simply giving in. And I know we on the National Board and you folks that are out here tonight are not into giving in, giving up. You're into giving it everything you got to get to the other side. The last giant I'm going to mention, and this is a big one, is crippling unbelief. Around us in the world, there's unbelief, of course, but even in the churches, sometimes, God did it back then in the Old Testament. Yeah, that was great, marvelous, but our God can't do those kind of things today, can he? And then even in us, we have to face our own doubts. Like the man who called out to Jesus, he said, Lord, I believe. Please help me in my unbelief. Help me conquer that unbelief. So I'm sure everyone in this room knows the story of the children of Israel. After they left Egypt, before they crossed the Jordan River, Moses sent 12 men to spy out the land. 10 were bad, 2 were good. 10 thought that the giants were bigger than the promises of God. But Joshua and Caleb believed that God's promise was bigger than the giants. And yet the people that they reported to, the Israelites, chose to believe the negative report of the 10 unbelievers, not the faith-filled encouragement of the 2. See, the majority is not always right. Why is it that way? Why do so many Christians fall for that same thing today? They follow the polls. They just think, well, it's impossible. So it all has to do with faith. We are the only party that claims to put God first. And we don't care if the others join us. We'd love it if the other parties became faith-filled parties as well. But we don't want to compromise and become more like them. As Christians today, it's not just in the CHP, but we may shake our heads at the Israelites of Moses' day. After all, they heard the audible voice of God on the mountain. They ate manna from heaven, and they walked through the Red Sea. Why, then, did they not obey the clear commands of God? Well, it's just simply that they saw the giants. They forgot about God's power and faithfulness. They listened instead to the voices of reasonableness and common sense, the voices of practicality, compromise, and pragmatism. Just going to share quickly on the Manning conference we were at last week, a little interlude here. We had a table, 4 of us, at the conference. We went to many workshops. We listened to the leadership hopefuls that are running for the Conservative Party leadership next year. Many good things. We learned a lot. We met a lot of people. And it was worthwhile. But in, I think, 3 days of listening to people from the stage, the movers and shakers in a conservative movement, a conservative party movement, I don't think I ever heard the word abortion, pro-life, gay, marriage, freedom of religion, because those aren't the issues that they're concerned with. And it's really a shame that in the interest of compromise and pragmatism and trying to have a bigger tent, that the most important things are being left out. So as believers today, we may shake our heads at King Saul and at the army that stood trembling before Goliath and the Philistines. We might ask ourselves, why were they afraid? They had God. Well, it's easy for us because we know the end of the story. We know about the slingshot and the 5 smooth stones. We know about David's faith, and we know how God caused him to prevail. But for Saul and the army, all that was in the future. Just have to ask ourselves, would we have been like David? Would we have been like Caleb and Joshua before they received the answer? Our life of faith is like that. We have to exercise our faith before we see the answer. We have to see the answer with our eyes, and we have to see it in polling numbers, then we're not acting in faith. See, I've never had the pleasure of eating manna, and I haven't walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. But we in this room and we in this nation, all those who name the name of the Lord, have something that the children of Israel did not have. We have something that Saul and his army did not have. We have the Bible. We have Jesus' words. We have the record of the resurrection. We have the Holy Spirit living within. We have no excuse not to believe our God. A man named Leonard Ravenhill wrote a book called Sodom Had No Bible. We Christians today, we may criticize the Sodomites for their sin. We may criticize the Israelites for their unbelief. But we have no excuse for not obeying it. We have the Old and the New Testaments. We know all the promises for obedience, and we know the tragic cost of unbelief. Our God has not changed. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. His promises are sure. He's able to accomplish all that he sets out to do, and he's able to empower us to accomplish his purposes and to fulfill our destiny as his people. He does this in our families. He does this in our churches. He can do it in our nation. He can do it in our time if we will not draw back in unbelief. We in the CHP have a Jordan River before us in 2016. There are obstacles we will have to overcome if we want to achieve all that God has for us. God calls us to step into the waters, believing that he will make a way for us. We need to exercise our faith in spite of disappointments and challenges. I want to give you a short update on CHP activities, our plans at National, what we hope to accomplish in the months ahead. And in order to succeed, we will need your ongoing help. And thank you so much for being here tonight, for helping us thus far. Coming back from our recent spy mission to Ottawa, I don't want to be like the unbelieving spies. I want to give you a good report. Our God has opportunity for us in Ottawa and in this nation, but we have to exercise our faith to get there. We have to put our feet in the Jordan, believing that our God is able to do abundantly above all we can ask or think. I've been to Ottawa a number of times since accepting the role of leader in 2014, and every time I've been to the nation's capital, I find open doors, open hearts, people willing to listen and willing to help. It was great to be there together with our four for the Manning Conference. And here's the things we did. We attended the Manning Conference, met a lot of people, got the message out, talked to some of the leadership hopefuls. We met with MPs in the government lobby. We talked to them about the assisted suicide bill. We used, by the way, ARPA's excellent bit of research that they've done, the proposal that they have put forward. They've sent it to all the MPs, but we handed it to the MPs and asked them to consider standing for the right thing, which is not the killing of the innocent. We did visit ARPA's office. First time I've been up there on the 20th floor at 130 Albert Street. It's a tremendous office. Happened to Mike Shelton was there, Andre Schutten, Colin Postma, and it was the day that they issued the statement about Kathy Wagenthal's bill or motion, the Molly and Cassie's law. And they're doing great work there. We appreciate them. We conducted a press conference in the Charles Lynch press room in Parliament Hill, in the center block of Parliament. Second one we've done there. And that was on the need for conscience protection for doctors and other healthcare professionals. And we held a meeting with our new members there. 14 came out. It was a miserable night. We weren't sure if anybody would come out, and 14 of our new members came out to talk about forming an EDA for the Ottawa area. So we're quite encouraged by that. 2015, way back in October, August, September, October, the 11-week campaign was a pivotal campaign for us. We believe that that campaign was a stepping stone for the growth and development of the CHP and will help us to run a stronger campaign in 2019. So we did several things, especially in the Ottawa area, but across the country, that we had never done before. We conducted an automated voters call. We took the voters list, we got it turned into phone numbers. We were able to hire a company that would call all those people. We gave them a 1-minute message about the CHP, our pro-life, pro-family vision, and invited them to a meeting. And a bunch came out. Some of them became members, some voted for us, some are helping us plan for a new EDA. We targeted YouTube video ads in every riding where we had a candidate, and we had, by the way, I want to personally say we had 30 top-notch candidates in 2015, and I really appreciate the work that they did, the cooperation we were able to have in getting a good, solid message out to people wherever we had candidates. We hosted a national telephone town hall. Many of you participated in that. We want to do that again. Many of our members said we'd like to do that again. We held our first press conference there. We conducted 2 video conference calls with all our candidates on our Zoom video conference. We have this tremendous technology. It's very cost-effective. It costs us $99 a year. We conduct our national board meetings that way often. BC is now conducting, both the BC Council and CHP BC and Surrey Centre are conducting many of their meetings using that technology. And of course, we had our strategy of trying not to run in most areas where there was a pro-life conservative incumbent, and that was something that did get us a lot of acceptance and approval within the pro-life movement. We built bridges with that, and I'm going to talk about why the next campaign is probably going to be quite different in that regard. We did learn one lesson. I don't know how much you experienced it in this area, but it was a bit of a painful lesson for us in Ottawa. By the way, in Ottawa, I don't know all the numbers across the country, but we had 740 people most of whom had never heard of the Christian Heritage Party before, gave us their votes in 2015. And so we count that as a success as well. In 2015, especially in Ottawa, many voters did not wait for a voting day to vote. They voted in the advanced polls. I'm told that about 30% of Canadians voted in the advanced polls, or at least in the Ottawa area. So that meant that in the latter weeks of the campaign, we're knocking on doors, we're giving out brochures, we're still putting up more signs, and people are saying, hey, I already voted. I mean, whether I like your policies or not, it's too late. So we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. That was a new phenomenon in 2015. The other parties, of course, are trying to get people to vote early so they don't get all the information. And it is nice if we can get that working for us instead of against us. I want to review a little bit this concept of electoral reform, just to touch on that topic. There has been a lot of discussion about it already. It was one of the things that our new PM promised. He said 2015 would be the last election conducted under the first past the post system. And it's too early to tell what shape that electoral reform will take. Our PM seems to be talking about ranked ballots or preferential balloting. There's something called a single transferable vote, and then there's also proportional representation. If we get preferential balloting, that means in every riding, the excuse of a wasted vote will just disappear. At least if people think through the issues, because you'd be able to put your Christian Heritage Party first, Conservative Party second, if that was your choice. If you wanted to put another one down, maybe a Green or whatever, or Canadian Action Party. And no candidate would win without 50% of the vote. In other words, 50% of the voters in any riding would have to say, yes, either my first, second, or third choice is for this candidate and this party. It would completely take away any thought of a split vote, a wasted vote, strategic voting, because people could vote for us, and if we didn't get enough vote, if we didn't get 50% or enough vote to count significantly, their second vote would still count. So that's one way to go. It would reduce or eliminate the need for us to withhold candidates in any riding, because we still, those people would just have no reason not to vote for us, either on their first or second ballot choice. With proportional representation, of course, CHP's policy is mixed member proportional representation. There are different models. With proportional representation, it also makes sense for us to run in as many ridings as possible, because even if we get 0.5% or 1% or 2% of the vote, all those votes would count towards a national percentage, and we would qualify for some level of representation. Anyway, either way, it's to our advantage to plan on running as many candidates as we can in 2019. And we've set an arbitrary goal of at least 100 candidates. We've never been there before. There's no reason we can't be there in 2019. We got 3.5 years to do our homework, find candidates, good candidates, build war chest, build local awareness, and prepare to run high-level campaigns. So we have to find those candidates, and I've learned something. Those candidates are over there on the other side of the Jordan. We have to get over there and start looking for them. We have to find them, help them catch the vision, and help them prepare. I want to tell you for a little bit about ongoing projects at the National Board. As most of you know, our National Board generally meets 3 times each year, usually 2 face-to-face meetings, 1 or 2 video conference meetings. In January, it was a video conference meeting. We did our budget for the year. And I just want to tell you, it's a real privilege to work with this board. Everyone on the board is a blessing to me and an encouragement, and those who are here, we serve on the board, thank you very much for your good work. It's all I can say, it's a real privilege. Thank God for each one of you. The biggest event looming on the horizon for us is the 2017 convention, which we're planning to hold in Ottawa next year, probably in September, on the 150th anniversary year of the birth of Canada. So we're excited about using the auspicious occasion of Canada's sesquicentennial to get as many of our members as possible to convene in Ottawa, celebrate Canada together, and to tour the Parliament buildings. We want to stand together under the Peace Tower and look up at those words written in stone, "He shall have dominion from sea to sea and from the rivers unto the ends of the earth." We want to take a tour of Parliament together. We want our members, as many as possible, to come together and catch the vision, see what we're facing, what we're trying to get to, what it looks like, and to, of course, then do our business building better policies for our party going forward. And another project that's underway with the National is something that our leader Jim Natchek initiated a few years ago. That was the development of CHP departments. It was a great idea. It was approved by National. The idea was to get small groups of people working on, there'd be an agriculture department, a Department of Defense, Department of the Environment, and to do research, to coordinate with other like-minded groups. For instance, the Finance Department would coordinate with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, maybe the Fraser Institute, and so on. Get the best ideas that we can, put them together into policies, and then to use that department to convey our good policies back to the groups that actually should be supporting. It was a great idea. It just never happened. And I guess one of the reasons it never happened, we were anticipating building a combined database and website that was going to have silos of information, and it was a bit complex. We found out that website database that we were hoping to have was going to cost $40,000 or $50,000, and we weren't in a position to advance that. So a couple months ago I said, we're going to go ahead with the departments, we're just not going to wait for the database. We're going to get people, there's many other ways to communicate, and we're going to get them off the ground. You'll be getting your update magazine soon in the mail, the spring version. It will be inviting each one of you and all of our other members across the country, anyone who has expertise, experience, passion, or interest in one of the major areas. We're hoping to have 12 committees, maybe 6 working by the end of the year. I'll be participating at arm's length with these committees, but keeping in touch with them. Their ideas hopefully will come through national and then on to the convention in 2017 in hopefully well-written, well-researched motions that can be debated, discussed, and approved or changed. So I asked the candidates first, our last year's candidates, to consider participating, and now we'll be asking the rest of our party. So if you or someone you know would fit into one of those categories, especially with some experience in the field, we would really appreciate you participating. Just want to say that since November 2014, my life has been somewhat of a whirlwind. I'm loving it that way, and my wife is loving it most of the time. She sometimes is traveling with me. She did come with me. We drove across the country for the campaign last fall. Spent a couple months coming across, campaigning and going back. She went with me to Vancouver Island in January, where we met with a lot of new people. She can't always go with me, but she always spends several days getting me ready to go, which I appreciate. In May, I plan to come back to Ontario for the March for Life again in Ottawa, and then stick around for the National Prayer Breakfast, and hopefully we'll spend some more time with our members in the Ottawa region. 2 things. I'm near the end. Thank you for your patience. I know it's a bit long. I try to get it all in. I don't get here very often. I don't have you all in the room often, so thank you for your patience while I try to plow through. 2 things I would encourage each one of us to do. If each one of us would determine to sign up 1 or 2 new members this year, or even better yet, this month, that would be great if we could move the party forward. The only way we're going to know we're moving forward is by membership numbers. We added a whole bunch in Vancouver Island in January, many more. Some people are not quite ready to join the party, and that's understandable. They want to look at everything closely. But if they have an email address, they can get on our weekly communique. Every Tuesday, they'll get a reminder about the CHP, get our opinion on certain topics, and hopefully eventually will become members. So in your discussions with your friends, neighbors, relatives, church, fellow parishioners, you can always offer that option as well if they're not quite ready to take out a membership. Of course, the CHP always faces an uphill battle in many ways, and one of those is in money. So far, we've not yet earned the 60% taxpayer rebates that the candidates of the big parties receive. Every candidate that gets over 10% of the vote in any riding, their campaign gets back 60% of what they spent. So it's a good reason for us to at least set a goal of, we want to win, but at least if we got 10% of the vote, we'd get over half of the money back that we spent. The federal party, I think the Conservatives were allowed, by their own changes to the rules, they were allowed to spend $50 million last year in the campaign. I don't know what they actually spent, but they will get 50% of that back. So if they spent $50 million, they'll get $25 million of taxpayer dollars back coming from you and me, and then we support our own party as well. So just going to plug the $1 a day program. Many of you in this room, maybe most of you, are already giving either one time a year. Many give it at the year end. some are on a monthly donation program. Just want to throw it out there. Most people in this room would know you get a generous 75% refund. If you are a taxpayer, you get 75% of the first $400 back. So if you give $400, or the $1 a day program through electronics funds transfer is $30 a month, $360 a year, you get all but $90 back. So that $90 in a year would cost you $7.50 a month, or 25 cents a day. So we call it a $1 a day program, but it's really, if you're a taxpayer, it's a 25 cents a day program. And many of you in this room I know are giving 4 times that much. Thank you very much for that. We need the big donors as well. But many of our members who aren't up to that can probably afford 25 cents a day. If you can't, let us know, maybe we can help you out. So, this is a rhetorical question. I don't need a show of hands, but I want to know if we are ready to cross the Jordan in 2016. There were 2 spies out of the 12 who said that they were ready the first time when Moses sent them in. One was Joshua and the other was Caleb. And I kind of like that because I have a grandson whose name is Caleb Joshua, so I hope that he will be like those 2 men. Sometimes the bad choices of others can hold us back from a goal that we could otherwise achieve. When the children of Israel refused to believe God and they refused to go in, Caleb and Joshua had to wander in the desert with them for 40 years, waiting for God's second chance, second opportunity. But when it came, they were ready. They had not become disheartened, nor discouraged, nor cynical, nor lazy, nor fearful. In fact, Caleb said to Joshua, I'm 85 years old today, yet I'm as strong today as I was 40 years ago. And he said, that mountain there where those giants live, that's the one I want. That's the one God promised me. Let me take it. And he did. God rewards faithfulness. In January, on the way to Vancouver Island, I spent 3 days with Arnie Bryan. Some of you know he is 98 years old. He's the founder of Prayer Canada. He lost his wife a little while ago, so he told me I'm just learning to cook now. And he did a fine job cooking meals for me for 3 days. He just renewed his driver's license for 5 more years. So I got up with him. The night I arrived, we had a BC Council meeting. He's our prayer coordinator for BC Council, so we participated online in that video conference. The next morning we got up at 5:30 because we had to get to a 6 o'clock prayer meeting. At that prayer meeting, like we have a little Prayer Canada post in Telpa. We have 2 former mayors, all CHP members that we meet together in the village council chambers, and we pray for our mayor, our council, our fire department, our MP, our MLA, the Prime Minister, the Premier, church leaders in the area. But when I went with Arnie to his prayer meeting, they had a stack of papers with a picture of every Premier of every province, a list of all the cabinet ministers by name in every province and for the federal government. And they pray for them by name. And it's quite powerful. So that was a 2-hour prayer meeting. Next morning at 5:30, Arnie was up again to go to another prayer meeting. And I just really got encouraged by him. Like many of you in this room, Arnie Bryan determined a long time ago that he was going to make a difference in Canada. And he's not thrown in the towel. He continues to encourage me and many others by his faithfulness and commitment. And so do you folks in this room. Thank you very much for your commitment. God has great plans for us. Plans for good and not for evil. Plans to give us a future and a hope. We must not grow weary or disheartened. If we will trust in Almighty God, we will eat the fruit of the land. We will leave a legacy for our grandchildren. We will be able to stand in an evil day. We will be heard. We will leave an imprint on this generation. We will blow the trumpet and warn our neighbors, and we will shine our light. And like Joshua, we will leave a heap of stones by the Jordan River as we cross, as a testimony to future generations of the faithfulness of God. Thank you very much.